This is Jim Cason with Riverbend Baptist Church in Riverbend, North Carolina. We are continuing our series on the significant biblical battles. This one is actually for the 12th of July, 2020, being recorded a few days earlier. At this particular point, having started with the beginning of the Old Testament, we're looking at some more things about King David. And we're in 1 Samuel chapter 30, beginning with the first verse. We're going to see a very significant battle, and we're going to see what happens in a battle if you're not checking everything out. Now it happened, when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day, that the Amalekites had invaded the south, and Ziklag, attached Ziklag, burned it with fire, and had taken captive the women and those who were there from small to great. They did not kill anyone, but carried them away and went their way. Okay, so looking back here, David and his men had been in a battle. They'd been battling with the Philistines. They'd been trying to keep the Philistines from being a problem in Israel. But for this battle, they left home, and apparently they felt like they needed all of them, so they took off. Ziklag was their home at that particular time. Okay. So while they're off fighting one enemy, another enemy, the Amalekites, comes and sneaks in. Nobody really there to defend the place, the women and children, some of the older guys. So you get back, things are not good at all. Verse 3, David and his men came to the city, and there it was, burned with fire. Their wives, their sons, and their daughters had been taken captive. Then David and the people who were with him lifted up their voices and wept until they had no more power to weep. They were not happy at all. Verse 5, and David's two wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess and Abigail the widow of Nabal the Carmelite, had been taken captive. Verse 6, now David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons and his daughters. Okay. That is one of the perils of leadership, whether it is physical leadership, leadership in this world, or leadership spiritually in this point in time. If everything is going smooth, the folks are all happy, oh, you're the greatest guy there ever was. But if something goes wrong, and especially if that something really adversely affects them, they're not happy at all, and they're talking about stoning David. Now, was David responsible for all this? Not really. He was the leader at the time, and they did go on based on his instructions, but God was the one who told him to go. So, we continue in that same verse, but David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. That is a very key spiritual point. When all the world is against you, and your friends and your neighbors and everybody else, the strangers, they're all against you, you strengthen yourself in the Lord, if you know the Lord. Verse 7, and then David said to Abiathar the priest, Abimelech's son, please bring the ephod here to me. Remember, the ephod was a garment that by a Mosaic law was set up really to be worn directly by the high priest and used by him. But David asked him to bring it. Continues, Abiathar brought the ephod to David, and David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I pursue this troop? Shall I overtake them? And the Lord answered him, pursue, for you shall surely overtake them, and without fail recover all. Verse 9, so David went, he and the 600 men who were with him, and they came to the brook Besor, where those who stayed were left behind. That's interesting. 200 of the men, as we'll find out in verse 10, stayed behind, and we'll find out why. Verse 10, but David pursued, he and 400 men. For 200 stayed behind, who were so weary they could not cross the brook Besor. They would have been washed away by the waters. All of them were exhausted. They'd been out fighting and fighting probably for several days. They come back. Everything is lousy. They weep for a while. Now they're pursuing the enemy, and they're all tired. Continuing on with verse 15. What we find out between verse 10 and verse 15 is they ran across a slave who had been in bad physical shape and got left behind by the conquering Amalekites. David said to him, "Can you take me down to this troop?" So he said, "Swear to me by God that you will neither kill me nor deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will take you down to this troop." Verse 16, when he had brought them down, there they were, spread out over all the land, eating and drinking and dancing, because of all the great spoil which they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from the land of Judah. They were having a happy. Verse 17, then David attacked them from twilight until the evening of the next day. These guys are already exhausted. They start at twilight. They go right on till the next twilight, 24 hours of fighting. Not a man of them escaped, except 400 young men who rode on camels and fled. So David recovered all that the Amalekites had carried away, and David rescued his 2 wives, and nothing of theirs was lacking, either small or great, sons or daughters, spoil, or anything which they had taken from them. David recovered all. Okay. God gave him the victory. Verse 20. And then David took all the flocks and herds they had driven before their other livestock and said, "This is David's spoil." In other words, they got back not only their own stuff, they also got back the stuff the Amalekites had seized from the Philistines. Verse 21. They're on their way home now. Now David came to the 200 men who had been so weary that they could not follow David, whom they also had made to stay at the brook Besor. So they went out to meet David and to meet the people who were with him. And when David came near the people, he greeted them. Now, this is a great spiritual moment of victory for the whole bunch, really. But, and there's always that but, verse 22, then all the wicked and worthless men of those who went with David answered and said, because they did not go with us, we will not give them any of the spoil that we have recovered, except for every man's wife and children, that they may lead them away and depart. Huh? Boy, there were some people in there that didn't credit the Lord with a victory. There were some people there that were suffering real strong from big sin. I want it all. Selfishness. Yeah. You know, the enemy will come against you and attack you even after God helps you win a battle. Verse 24. No, verse 23, I'm sorry, but David said, my brethren, you shall not do so with what the Lord has given us, who has preserved us and delivered into our hand the troop that came against us. For who will heed you in this matter? But as his part is who goes down to the battle, so shall he be his part who stays by the supplies. They shall share alike. So it was, from that day forward, he made it a statute, means a law, an ordinance, a law, for Israel to this day. So, think about it. Sometimes you're too old, you're not able to go out and fight the battle physically. You don't have strength to go directly fight the enemy. But you stay home or you stay where you are and you pray. Well, the good news there is you're also part of the victory because your praying helped motivate the victory. Verse 26. Now when David came to Ziklag, he sent some of the spoil to the elders of Judah, to his friends, saying, here is a present from you, from the spoil of the enemies of the Lord. To those who were in Bethel, those who were in Ramoth of the south, those who were in Jatir, those who were in Aror, those who were in Sipmoth, those who were in Eshtomiah, those who were in Rachel, those who were in the cities of the Jeharmeelites, those who were in the cities of the Kenites, those who were in Hormah, those who were in Chorasan, those who were in Attah, those who were in Hebron, and to all the places where David himself and his men were accustomed to rove. This is one of the big signs of a person who's really following the Lord. Our inner nature is just full of sin. The scripture says the heart is deceitful. It is deceitfully wicked and prone to nothing but evil. We're full of selfishness. We're full of jealousy. We're full of lust. We're full of everything like that. God has conquered that if we submit. That's the big clue right here. You got to submit to it. Okay. So David blessed not only the 400 that went out and the 200 that went part of the way, but all these other people too. You know, it doesn't really say how much additional spoil there was besides that which had belonged to them when they were at home in Ziklag. May have been a huge amount of it, you know. But anyhow, one of the great signs of a person that's following the Lord and following the Spirit of Jesus is when you are generous. As you give, so shall you receive. Now that doctrine can be perverted. There's a lot of folks out there saying, you send our ministry $1,000 seed and God will just bless you financially beyond belief. Well, God might choose to bless you that way, but I think He expects you to have common sense enough to listen to what this person's saying. They are not motivated by the right reason. They are motivated because they want something for themselves. And they're using the Bible. Well, God ain't Santa Claus. You figured that out yet? He just plain isn't. He's God the Most High. First off, everything we have is a loan. He owns the whole universe. He created it. He made it and all belongs to Him. He loans it out, but that doesn't mean it doesn't belong to Him. And that's one of the harder lessons for us to learn. Moving on into chapter 31, the first few verses. Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled before the Philistines and fell slain on Mount Gilboa. Then the Philistines followed hard after Saul and his sons. And the Philistines killed Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua, Saul's sons. The battle became fierce against Saul. The archers hit him, and he was severely wounded by the archers. Then Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and thrust me through with it, lest these uncircumcised men come and thrust me through and abuse me." But his armor-bearer would not, for he was greatly afraid. Therefore Saul took a sword and fell upon it. And when his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he also fell on his sword and died with him. Now that's loyalty. Now Saul, his 3 sons, his armor-bearer, and all his men died together that day. See, David was anointed as king years and years before this, and Saul was still king. But David did not fail to believe in the promise. He was hounded, he was pursued, they chased after him, the Philistines went after him, the Amalekites went after him, and Saul's people went after him. But he got carried through all of that. Just because we don't get deliverance instantly doesn't mean it isn't coming, friend. It's coming. It's coming in God's time. We're told to hold out till the end. I think we're getting closer to those end days. Nobody knows exactly when. Anybody that claims they know, the Bible says they're lying. Jesus himself, while he was down here on earth, didn't know. That's what he said. He said, only the Father knows. But that time is going to come. And how are we going to live until that time comes? Now, God willing, a week or so from now, we'll be back with a bit more of the biblical battles. I'd like to close this thing out by mentioning some people for prayer. First one is David Falarndua. I probably mispronounced that. I'm almost sure I did. Anyhow, forgive me, David. David's recovering from heart surgery. He was in ICU for a while. He's now out of ICU. Pastor Tim Irwin, he's recovering from knee surgery. He's anxious to get it out and walk on that knee and drive and come back. But God's wisdom is saying, wait a little bit longer, wait a little bit longer. It'll be time soon. Others that have had recent surgeries are Maddie Jones, Shelby Gordon, Olivia McGew. Pray for Louis Eames. He's in cancer treatment now in the western part of the state, and for his wife and his son. For the Locklears, Doug and Rosalind. For Doug's sickness. For the Probst family. And for two ladies that are in isolation because they're in nursing homes. And you know how it is here. If you're in a nursing home now, you don't get to see your family anymore like you used to be able to. Joanne Jordan is one of them. And Evelyn Irwin, Pastor Tim's mother, is the other. Pray for our school systems right here in North Carolina and around the country and the world. That these officials will make a godly decision. They will not be advised by terror. They won't be advised by fearmongers, but they will make a godly decision on what to do this fall. I know there's some risk, but our kids need to be in school. The parents need it, the kids need it, their education needs it. Just pray for God's will there. And in the church, we should be praying. We should be repenting for the sins of our nation, even if we didn't personally commit all of them. I hadn't gone out and rioted. I hadn't gone out and looted or burned a building. But I should still be praying for the nation. Jesus didn't do any of those sins, and he took all of them, including all of mine, upon himself when he died on that cross, and that's why I'm forgiven. That's why you're forgiven if you're a believer. That forgiveness is available to all of us, but you got to ask for it, and you got to try to do right after you ask for it and do what he tells you to. Pray for the church outreach. I do really think that we are in the latter days. We don't know how long it's going to be before that rapture comes. Folks, we need to be praying for our nation. We need to have our outreach to unbelievers. If it's a little more difficult to do right now, do it. It needs to be done. Salvations. Jesus said the wheat fields are white for harvest. Let's get some laborers out there. God bless you. Have a great day. Lord willing, see you again. Bye-bye.